Hello, everyone. This is Naim Mahmood. I'm Sydney Chair for IIBA Australia, and welcome to the second virtual event of July. I'm very excited about today. Similar to last time, we have more than 300 people actually, close to 325 register for this event. And we're expecting more than 200 people to join online today. So if I could please ask you to put your name and from which city you're joining on the chat box so that we know who is here today. I have Sharon from Brisbane here, Darren from Melbourne. Oh, wow, I have Anthony from Qatar. How good is that? We have international attendees today. Christine from Brisbane, Niall from Brisbane as well. Thank you so much. Thanks for attending, not only from Australia, from outside Australia as well. In our last session, we had attendees from New Zealand and Malaysia as well. So it's not only across Australia, we are getting international attendees as well. So that's fantastic. Hello, Carl, great to see you again. I have Mark from Gold Coast, Alan from Melbourne. So it's a true national event. So just wait for a few more seconds for more people to join. I already have close to 100 people joined already as a participant. So, and the number is going up. Hello, Greg. Good to see you too. Yes, I'm wearing the IIBA t-shirt. Hello, Linda from Brisbane. Wow, we have Dana from... Hello, Dana. Dana is one of our speaker as well. She spoke in 2 of our BAPD. Good to see you, Dana. And we have Cora here. Cassie from Brisbane. Fantastic. Lots of people are already online. So let's start the session. So I just want to start the session by acknowledging with the acknowledgement of country. IIBA Australia chapter acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognize their continuing connection to land, water, and culture. We pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Just want to acknowledge that we have a lot of non-members join as well tonight. So if you're non-members, just go to australia.iiba.org website to know a lot more about us. IIBA is an independent not-for-profit association that focuses on the business analyst professions. So we do a lot of activities to improve the capability of business analysis. We advocate for business analysis profession in the market. And we organize a lot of networking events, virtual, face-to-face, and other things to make sure that we create a place for business analysts to meet, share their knowledge, experience, and help and work together to uplift the profession of business analysis. This is an organization run by volunteers, so I'm a volunteer. So I'm wearing the volunteer t-shirts, and everyone in IIBA Australia are volunteers. So it's an organization for you and run by you, run by business analysts. So if you want to contact us, go click on the About Us link, and you'll have the email address through which you can contact us. If you want to become a member or want to know more about the benefit of becoming a member, you can click on the Join Now button and get a lot more information. If you're not getting the emails about what we are doing in the Australian market, you can join our email list. Just click on the Join Our Email List option at the bottom right-hand side corner. Just want to talk a little bit about mentoring in IIBA Australia as well. So we piloted mentoring in Sydney in 2018. And since then, we are working together to improve the offering on mentoring program for our members. We do 2 type of mentoring program. We do a public mentoring program where any members can join as a mentor or mentee. And we also do corporate mentoring program where we provide a framework and tools and informations that you need to run a mentoring program within your organization. So if you want to run a business analysis mentoring program, we can assist you with that as well. There are a lot of benefits becoming a mentor or mentee, especially for the mentors. It's a fantastic opportunity to contribute back to the community. And of course, if you are want to recertify your CBAP certification or want to sit for the CBAP exam, the mentoring hours actually qualifies you to get PDU points that you require. And again, for mentees, it's a fantastic opportunity to learn from senior BAs and help you to uplift your skill. The mentor not only help you technically, they can also guide you with the career as well. So 2018, when we did the pilot in Sydney, 2019, we ran 2 corporate mentoring program with Woolworths and 1 public mentoring. This year in 2020, we already had 1 corporate and 1 public mentoring program. And the second public mentoring program, the EOI, will open on the first week of August. So if you are in Sydney and if you want to be part of the mentoring program as a mentor or as a mentee, please contact the Sydney branch, or we're going to let you know when the EOI is going to go out as well, so you can join as a mentor or mentee. The Brisbane branch is trying the mentoring program this year. So the program is in progress. Melbourne also wanted to start mentoring program this year, but due to COVID crisis, it's currently on hold. We're just monitoring the situation, and then we'll offer the mentoring program soon. Upcoming study groups. So there's study groups happening in different cities or organized by different cities. We have 3 different types of study groups. We have the BABOK study group, the BABOK Agile Extension study group, and a new study group on data analytics. So it's a pilot program which is starting end of this month or early next month. So keep an eye on that. We are encouraging the facilitators to actually join the data analytics study group so that they can go and organize more study group across Australia. Just want to highlight a little bit about the last event we had with Field Slate, becoming master influencer. It was really a fantastic event. We had more than 67 questions in the Q&A, and actually we just didn't have enough time at the end to answer all those questions. So Phil kindly created a video, and which is already uploaded in our IIBA Australia chapter YouTube channel. And he picked a couple of questions he found interesting, and he answered those questions in that video. So if you want to if you have joined the last event and if you want to know a little bit more about some of the questions you have asked but we didn't get a chance to answer, please feel free to go and have a look. And again, Phil's actual event video is also uploaded in our YouTube channel. On the bottom right, left-hand side corner, it shows the attendees. So we already had attendees from Malaysia and New Zealand last fortnight. And today we have attendees from Qatar and Dana from Chess. So very excited that our virtual events are expanding throughout the world. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for attending. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We highly encourage you to use the chat box to have a conversation within the attendees. So if you want to share a comment, if you want to share some tips, experience, some resources, please feel free to use the chat option to put those information. We're gonna ignore the raise hand option because we won't have enough time. But what we encourage you to do is put all your questions in the Q&A. So if you have any question to the speakers, please put your question in the Q&A, and I'll encourage everyone to like the questions you want the speaker to answer. The question which will get the highest number of likes will be answered during the session. So please put your question for the speakers in the Q&A section, and encourage everyone to like the question. And again, there's a special gift for the question, for the person whose question gets the highest number of likes. We're gonna come back to that later on. So there is a special prize for that. So please make sure that you like the questions. Just to introduce the facilitators today. So very excited, we have Brendon and Jarad from Epic Agile today facilitating the session. We are working with Brendon, Jarad, Ali, Michael, Mark, quite a few of people from Epic Agile to prepare this session. So we're working for the last 3 months on this session. So very excited that it's happening tonight, and expecting a lot to learn from them, and probably will be able to start using those ideas and tips and tricks from tomorrow when we are facilitating our workshops, events, or even meetings virtually tomorrow. So just want to introduce Brendon, Jarad, and Ali who are online, and Mark is also here today. He's a visual facilitator, so he's gonna do some cool design work that will be shared. So to you, Brendon and Jarad.
Thanks, Naeem. Hey guys, don't let the awesome fashion sense fool you. I'm Brendon, as you may have guessed. So what we might do is just check to Ali to introduce Epic for us.
Sure.
You've lost your
Hey
mute
guys,
button, haven't you?
No, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi guys, so I'm Ali, I'm Client Service Manager, and I've been working with Naeem and Brendon, Tubbsy and Mark to get this set up for tonight. So thank you so much for having us to Naeem and the IIBA. Basically, I just want to give you a quick intro about Epic. So we are business agility transformation specialists, and our mission is to co-create a deliberately different future for our clients. So basically, we just want to work with good organizations and help them to be the best that they can be. We originally started in Melbourne a few years ago. We then grew to Sydney. Following that, we went to Auckland, Singapore, and we most recently opened an office in Brisbane last year. So it's super exciting. We're a values-based organization. So EPIC actually stands for something. We have empathy, passion, integrity, and community. So community speaks to why we're here tonight. We're all about giving back. We're all about sharing with everyone else in our community. Thanks for showing your shirts, guys. So yeah, that's a bit of an overview, and I'll throw to Tubbsy to take it from here. Oh, and through the night, I'm going to be here to keep these guys on track. I'm going to be helping them with time boxing, so I'll be watching you guys.
Yeah,
thanks, Al.
And by Tubbsy, she means me, probably because of the COVID calories as much as my surname being Tubbs at the moment. And I've probably met some of you before, but right now it just says 123 down the bottom. So hi to the people I've met, hello to the people I haven't.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, so we want to start with just a bit of an intro to who we are. You may well have seen the video or read our bios, but in short, we're agile coaches, as Ali said. I'm an enterprise agility coach. I've worked with financial organisations, telcos, tech companies, pure online, bit in the motoring as well. And basically, I think the first line of my bio sort of says it all, if that's been circulated and you've seen it, which is really just, I got frustrated with traditional institutionalized thinking. And, you know, just thinking, God, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so I kind of fell down that whole rabbit hole that is agility. And I haven't really looked back. The only time I've looked sort of back down the tunnel is to help others to sort of unlearn and how do I take them on the journey. And some have referenced that as, you know, drinking the Kool-Aid. I don't really think it's so much that. I think it's more just, I found something that I think is really great, and it unlocks a lot of doors for not only myself, but for people in general. And so that's why I love doing it. So really short, I'm in Melbourne, just to give you some context. I'm actually, so being in Melbourne, I'm in lockdown. I'm actually talking to you from my prison cell. Bubba is just off camera. He's offered to just step out of camera for it. Thanks, Bubba, I appreciate that. I'm joking, by the way. Bubba is not my housemate. My wife and my 10-month-old son are downstairs. So if you hear any noises at any point, it's probably him yelling because it's his dinner time. And I've actually tagged out tonight because I do bath time. So I'm up here talking to all you guys. And she's doing time for him. And so Tubbsy.
Yeah, I'm Tubbsy. People call me Tubbsy. If somebody calls me Brendon, it's because I'm in trouble. I'm an enterprise agile coach as well. I've worked in massive retails, one of which I'm based at the moment. I've worked in airlines, television networks. And the thing I love about it is it transfers across everything. Agility, business agility transfers across everything. And for me, the key moment, the key unlock came when I realized that it played to my people skills. And we're in the people business. We're not in the business. And so some of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight is going to sort of unlock that understanding from you. I am not in an office at the moment. I'm in a garage. So, you know, that's a lot better. Maybe I'd rather be over here, but I'm in an office. And I will pass to Mark actually to give us a quick heads up on who he is.
Hi everyone, Mark Hunnelby. I'm a freelance illustrator and trainer with Epic Agile, and I'm going to be illustrating as best I can this conversation for today. So I'm going to go crazy and do an awful lot of drawing in a very short time. So I'm going to start as soon as I can, just to start with the framework. So I'll hand over back to Jarad, I guess.
Yeah, so we'll check in with Mark as we go later on, just to see how he's going. So as he said, he's going to capture sort of in real time some of what we're talking about, and we'll circulate that out in the following days, obviously post this session. Mark's going to have to remember to turn off his camera at some point, otherwise you're going to be looking up his nose because he's actually using the same device to draw on that he's also talking into.
I'll do that now.
Yeah, That wasn't obvious at all, was it, Mark? So I think the main thing from us, and you probably, and I saw it pop up very quickly on screen. I think it was Cheryl Lynn said, nice hats. So thank you for the hats. We'll talk about those in a second. But being from EPIC, we like to do things an EPIC way. And as Ali said, we're a value-based organisation. We like to be a bit different. It's one of the things that we call out, we like to do things differently because we're a culture hacking organisation. And so today's not a presentation. We are not a slide organisation. We actually don't use slides pretty much at all, unless clients specifically ask for, we'll need a deck for this to present to whomever or as reference, and then we'll argue our point. But we tend not to use slides. We're not going to today. We've got basically 2 slides, which are just screen grabs that we want to talk to if we get to that topic, and I'll get to that in a second. So today's just a conversation. And so probably the thing you're wondering is, Jarad, how the hell are we going to have a conversation when you're talking to a screen and we can't talk at you? So great question. A great question I hear you ask. And the reason
that is a great question.
The reason we're going to have this as a conversation is because we want to make and bring to life and make tangible some of the techniques we're going to talk about today of how do you work in a virtual world now that we've all gone that way, whether it's for a long time or a little time, we're yet to see. But so we're going to use some of those. And how are we going to do that? So I'm just going to run through a couple of them now. So Naeem's already mentioned the questions. So obviously that's one way to do it. We're going to try and capture those and answer those as best we can as we go through each topic. We potentially have some time at the end to cover off some of those as well. As you did say, best question does win a free spot on our next, or on your choice, I guess, of EPIC virtual facilitator training that we run, which is an awesome session, half-day session, just on how to facilitate in the virtual world. And it's really hands-on and goes through a lot of tools and techniques, and some of what we'll talk about tonight, but in a whole lot of detail, and it gets you actually doing them.
Leaves you with some real-world examples too, doesn't it?
It certainly does. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to use Slido. So I think in the chat at the moment, we'll be putting the Slido link in there for those that have used it before. It's a website you go to, and it allows real-time voting, so we can see, well, I can see what you actually want to talk about. And in that, we've got all the topics we're going to talk about. Whether we get through them all or not is another question. But it allows real time of what you guys to vote, so to interact with us and to say, this is what we're going to talk to. And we're also sharing the Slido number in there, which is just a reference to what that is.
Yeah,
we're also going to use a couple of techniques around something called Pechakucha, which is just time boxing. Pure Pechakucha is 20 slides and each slide for 20 seconds. We're not going to do that. But we are going to time box each of those topics to 5 minutes so that we can work through them. But what we will do is another way to interact is to say, if you do want to spend longer on it, if we hit that time limit, and we'll have a timekeeper working in the background letting us know. But if we do get to that time limit and we've got a good vein of thought, or you've got some great questions and you want to spend a little longer on it, then what we'll do is we'll do a thumbs up, thumbs down in the chat, and we'll just take a really quick pulse check and go, great, we're going to spend an extra 2 minutes on this, or we'll move on. One of the other things we're going to do, and I haven't told him this on purpose, Naeem, what we're going to ask you to do is play a role for us today, which is a great technique we really like, which is a meeting mojo. A meeting mojo is, mojo, or the MO, stands for
meeting owner.
And the J stands for joyful observer. And so we're going to ask Naeem to play the joyful observer role today. Now, what does that mean? What it means is at the end of this session, we're going to get him to rate how the session went, how the whole thing went.
What did you observe?
Content, questions that were asked, all of those type of things. Did we hit the outcomes that we said we were going to do? And so that's just a rating of 1 to 10 and a quick spiel of, yep, we thought we did really well. It's an 8, or, obviously it's going to be a 10, but, or it's a 2 and you guys completely missed the mark and you rambled a lot or whatever.
Yeah. And Jarad, I just want to add, you normally want to nominate that person at the beginning of the session, don't you?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And that's why we've done it this way. And you don't need to prep it, which is one of the reasons that we haven't prepped today. So I'm sure Naeem's now going, I wish you had a prep. So what is the aim?
Yeah.
So the aim is obviously face-to-face in the virtual world. Really, at the end of the day, it's, Tubbsy and I were talking about this before. We really, it's sort of that Wizard of Oz idea of, we want to sort of draw the curtain back and let you see behind the curtain of sort of what's going on, almost the duck under the water. So we're going to give you tips. We're going to give you tricks. We're going to talk about people and reference people that we really like for no reason, just that these are good resources or people that, in terms of knowledge or whatever it happens to be, readily available, that you can go and have a look at, spend further time investigating. We'll talk a lot about clients where we can, good and bad examples, because I think bad's just as important.
Yeah, by the way, that's a technique, just because I want to get a word in edgeways. What we're going to be doing a lot of, this is what we call an unconference style. And so if anybody out there is taking notes and writing stuff down, do it while we're talking, do it while we're having the conversation. What we're trying to create is an interaction with all of you out there, as opposed to us sitting here and just talking to you and talking at the screen, which is why we don't have slides, which is why we're not just talking to a presentation, but we're trying to create meaningful interaction with, at the moment, 130 people out there. And we're testing this out and we're going to see what happens.
Cool. So, okay. So I'm sure I see the Slido link has been shared with you.
Yep.
So if you are able to log into that, have a look at the topics. I'll give you a quick rundown of what they are. The first one, which is not actually on there, but we're going to start with, just so that you've got a bit of time in the background to do some voting, is basically just called The Same But Different. And it's really around the world is changing. The way that we do things either has changed or needs to change. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve hasn't. So that's the first topic we'll start with. We'll spend 5 minutes talking about that. While we're doing that, you can get into Slido and have a look at the others. We've got remote collaboration, which surprisingly does what it says on the tin.
The next one, sorry mate, keep going.
Do something that's inherent, that inherently is inherently together, yet we're currently having to be separate.
The next one is around wanting something, creating a human connection. It's really around remembering that we are interacting with people and we're interacting in real life situations. And how do you maintain that connection that we have through a screen? It's changed completely, and it's about to change again, quite likely. So we're talking about tips and tricks on some of the stuff that we've done, as well as some of the stuff you might be able to do.
Next, we've got Bring the Fun, which is a really good quote here that we quite like, which is people forget what you did, how you did it, but they're not going to, they won't forget how it made them feel. So long after this session's finished, you've probably forgotten what we've said, but you hopefully take away our silly hats, if nothing else, and hopefully there's a little bit more than that, but how it made you feel.
Yeah, that's by the way, that's a quote from Maya Angelou, one of my favorite quotes from, I think, the 60s. She was a poet. The other one we've got is cultural sustenance, and that's around personal well-being. From a lot of the things we do, what we seek to do is create an awesome culture, be it silly hats, be it awesome values. We look to create a culture that fills your cup, basically. How do you go about making sure that we are not all about business, but we're also taking that human aspect into account?
Cool. And I'm conscious of, we've talked a little bit, so I want to get into it. So the next one's around tools, which surprisingly is about tools. The next one's about techniques, which is just some techniques that we really love. And there's some probably things that you can take away potentially. Like some of them you probably already know and are already using, but some of them you can start. We're then going to talk about seeking engagement. That's not eHarmony or Tinder for anybody who's interested. It's about building trust and engagement. And then finally, we're going to talk about productivity, and which I like to think of as that sort of false idol. So we've talked a little bit, so I think we're going to jump right in. And we'll start talking about the same but different. This is obviously the world's changing. I think the thing for me is about changing that narrative. We need to go from, particularly when we're thinking about, how do we engage. I really love the terms that Naeem used before around you guys do facilitation, and I think that is probably the crux of it. It's moving from virtual meetings to that virtual experience type of idea. One person we really love is Dara Simkin. She's got something called Culture Hero. Does some fantastic work around that. So I highly recommend you go and have a look at some of her stuff. Some good tips in there. But really, it's about adaptability. It's about inventiveness. It's about creativity, and it's about innovation. And those skills are going to come to the fore. We see distillers moving to hand sanitizer production. We see 5-star restaurants. Attica here in Melbourne has gone to community-based. What can they do? As well as obviously selling some stuff as well. And I think the key thing for me here is historically, pandemics have always brought great change. You could look back and it brought down the Byzantine Empire. Obviously, and then the 16th century, you had the Black Plague. Yet this changes fundamentally the way culture happens after that, forgetting about the health side of things. Spanish flu, it led into the world wars and the like. So it fundamentally changes our world. And I think we need to probably start to think this is going to change it, even if it's not to that extent, but it certainly will.
Yeah, and I might add to that, Jarad. We might be a little bit of the frog in the pot. You know, the old analogy, the frog in the pot. The frog in the pot on the stove, turn the heat up very lightly, and it starts to boil without realizing it's actually boiling. We've already started to change. We've changed drastically, and what I see a lot of the traps becoming is people falling into a way of going, we need to emulate what it's like when we're face to face. I think that's, to a degree, a good way to go about it. However, we've got to remember, we're not face to face anymore. This is something completely different, right? So whilst the outcomes are the same as well, the thinking around how we're going to emulate that becomes different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. You've got that idea around remote problems. Oh, now we've got all these remote problems. You don't really like, there's some tech stuff and some stuff like that. But at the end of the day, remote problems are just the same problems we always have. You know, one of the things I'm hearing a lot of clients, and we're hearing a lot across Epic when we do our syncs and we're talking to each other, is clients have just got too many meetings. I'm dealing with people at all levels, C-level all the way through to team. I've got too much stuff to do. We've always had that. We've already had too many meetings. We've always lacked purpose, we've lacked value, all of those type of things. So these can be solved the same way. It's just that facilitation of how you go about doing that. You know, you're planning ahead, you've got to think about your audience. You know, and as we said off the top, remember at the end of the day, we're all humans. So focus on the human element to all of this.
Right. And from a BA perspective, when you're gathering requirements and eliciting that stuff from the people on the other side of the screen, you've got to remember that you can't go big bang the way we used to. I come from a BA background as well. You have to target in on what matters now. You have to target in on those outcomes and then almost reverse engineer the people that you're talking to. Is stuff coming through on Slido, Jarad?
It's good. Thank you for that reminder. I'll just finish as I slide over to Slido. So I did see very quickly, Jarad, can you share your screen? I'm actually running two screens, and that's just because I can see some people, and at the same time I can see Slido and some other bits and pieces like that. So the thing I did want to say is, just to sort of close that topic, I guess, from my perspective, is be purposeful, not busy. And I think that's the real key for me. It's really easy to get caught up in, I need to be busy, and for lots of reasons, you know, trust elements as well as I just want to be busy, and, you know, I don't want to worry about what's going on the TV, all of those type of things, but be purposeful, and you'll get a lot more meaning from being purposeful than you do from being busy.
Yeah, Katie on the chat has said they are familiar with Dara Simkin from Culture Hero and they love her work.
Awesome, thank you. Next we have, if there are no questions.
Yep. What Slido is doing, by the way, what you can see is happening is real time. You guys are choosing the ones that you want to talk about or hear about the most, and that's going to the top of our pile.
So we will mostly listen to that. There are a couple of topics that are really close to our hearts, and we're going to try and slide in there. You know, but the next is techniques. So I think we'll let's go on and have a chat about that, because that's some cool stuff in there as well. And I guess we'll start with probably some of the techniques that we've used today in this session. And I think the first one's probably something along the lines of DEFT or power start. Two different ideas there. DEFT is about design, it's about environment, it's about facilitation, and it's about troubleshooting. So hopefully we don't need to get to the troubleshooting bit, but it's a great way to think of, if you're designing workshops or you're designing any session that you need from a facilitation perspective, elements that you may not usually, you probably usually think of the detail and the design element there, but you're not going to think of how am I going to facilitate this to get those things, or you might think of that, but you may not think of the environment as much. All really important elements.
Yeah, another great one that we use, what you might have heard before, social contracts, social agreements. It's really rules of engagement when you start a session, and that's, I wouldn't overthink it, but you might want to have a few. So you would have seen me put my hand up before, and Jarad immediately stopped talking. Well, not immediately, because he likes to talk. But he kind of clocked that there was somebody wanting to say something as well without me interrupting him. There's other things that you can talk about. We keep getting outcome focused, or, you know, rabbit holes are great to have a discussion in, but you want to know when to come back from them. That's a very simple, very basic technique, but it's very powerful as well, the social agreement.
So rabbit holes is really great. If you've got particularly if you can see everyone on screen, and you can do techniques, just hand signals are great as well. You know, you just do your rabbit ears, which just means you're going down a rabbit hole, and anyone can do that at any time. Somebody does that, then we go, yeah, I think we're going into too much detail. Let's lift it up a little bit.
Yep.
Voting. thumbs up, thumbs down, just simple stuff
Easy,
like that.
right? Visible, and you can work out what's going on. One of the other ones is an icebreaker. So one of the icebreakers, look, and icebreakers are one of those things where everybody groans when you say you're going to do an icebreaker, including me. But it's a really powerful way to make a human connection before diving into probably crunchy conversations a lot of the time. They're really good at the start, and they can be something silly. And what you generally find, we do them with all levels, by the way, from C-suite all the way down to everybody. We do it with everybody. And it constantly breaks the ice and reminds everybody that they're working with other human beings before you start getting into the crunchy stuff.
Yeah, so I hate the term icebreaker as well. So I was actually having this conversation in a session I was facilitating, and someone played it back to me and said, I really like warm-ups. And I'm like, I really like that too. So I think it's a much better reference, because that's what you're trying to do. You know, you're trying to warm up the crowd, basically, so you can get some laughs. If you're a comedian, you're trying to warm them up so you can get information from them, you know, that type of thing.
Yep, we used one before, Mojo. That's another one there. So the idea, you'll see the effectivity of that at the end of this.
Yeah,
yep.
I mentioned Power Start off the top. It's a really good one. Again, another acronym, stands for purpose, outcomes. The W being what's in it for me. So pretty good question there. Engagement, and roles and responsibilities. And so that was literally something that we did off the top. So you notice, set out the purpose. We talked about outcomes that you guys are going to get, tips and tricks and all that type of stuff. What's in it for you? That's what's in it for you. How are we going to engage? We talked about Slido and the like. And roles and responsibilities, a way for us to be collaborating and engaging.
Yep, and be very articulate with what you want to say, and try and put a bit of intonation in your voice as well, because I don't know how many meetings I've been into, I'm sure everybody else has, where you have a monotone running the meeting and just sits there and has a long-winded diatribe, and it's really hard to follow, and at the end of it, we're left wondering what we were actually listening to. So try and create short, sharp articulation about what you're after or what you're needing or what you can give, and, you know, just add a bit of energy, and you'll be amazed at what comes out of that.
Yeah, very much bring your whole self, like, to a session. It's hard to do sometimes. You might be having a bad day, you know, whether it's COVID related, like we're all human. We've got personal stuff going on. You know, if you've got a family member who's sick or had a test and waiting for a result, obviously going to influence how you're feeling and how you're going to run a session. I saw a question there around, can we mention some of the icebreakers? No, we can't. Yeah, of course we can. So one of the icebreakers is just hats, you know, and that's one of the reasons that we've done this today. It's just wear a silly hat. It's a great way to break things up. So if I take my hat off, apologize for my hat hair, but
you haven't got any, it's okay.
It's just a great way to create a connection there. It's the same with the floral shirts. We decided we were going to do that earlier, and when we jumped online, everybody left me hanging, and I'm the only one in the shirt. But again,
I'm going.
A way to create a human connection.
What I would say,
I was just going to list off the top.
You, me.
Go.
All right. What I would say is read your audience. If you're walking into a room full of execs, I wouldn't probably wear a floral shirt and a hat.
So this is where we disagree. So I would,
depending on the execs.
I would, and I have. Anyway, some other warm-ups. Treasure hunt is a one that I'm really liking at the moment. We're using quite a bit, which is, as it says on the tin, is basically saying the start of a session. Now, again, pick your session, pick the emotion and the energy you're trying to level at. But it's, I'm always one for pushing it a little bit further, because you could get the most senior person in the room just go, that was awesome. They're going to remember that session if you do something a little bit quirky potentially. So treasure hunt's a great way, and it literally is just, here's a list of items. We're going to spend 3 minutes, go get them. And you go and get, here's the bottle of wine we had last night, whatever the treasure hunt items that you might list off are. It's a great way to get people up and physical, which is a great way to get obviously blood pumping and people moving. And it's a great way to start a session because it brings energy. Remember, if you're coming from meeting after meeting after meeting, what is your point of difference? And that's why I say you create an experience, not a meeting, and people will remember that for a long time rather than it was just another meeting.
Yeah, and there's a question in there, how can you do warm-ups, icebreakers with execs, senior leaders? That's a great segue into that, Jarad, because the way I found it works quite well with that is something we call a check-in. You just draw a line, an arc that's 0 to 10, and you have a post-it that you put somewhere there, 0 being the worst, 10 being the best. And you can ask a simple question like, how was your weekend? Or what are you hoping to get out of this session? Or think of some question that's going to break that ice, but explain the science behind it. And the science behind it is creating psychological safety and openness. It's creating a different way of thinking instead of going straight into the work that you're trying to do. And when people understand the science, they're a lot more open to doing some of these silly things because they are silly and they're a bit of fun.
So I'm just checking Slido.
I was going to say, what's the next one?
Checking Slido at the same time.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, there's a couple other techniques that I know people are asking about. We've already mentioned a few. One's pass the item. So you literally have an item, like, you know, if you Lord of the Flies, anybody who remembers that book or has read that, bit of a conch, obviously not the confrontational sort of brawling aspect of Lord of the Flies, but more just what is the item and you can talk with that, or it's a way to pass it. Great way, great team activity. Literally, Brady Bunch, you've got people on screen. How do I pass to the next person? And Tubbsy goes, oh, thanks very much. You know, those type of things.
Yep, pass them up, yep.
Look, there's a ton of them online. And, you know, warm-ups are literally, you look through them and go, rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. Oh, I like that, I like that, I like that.
Yep.
And someone else will look at the same list and they will take the complete opposite ones that you took. That's perfectly fine. So what resonates with you is really key.
Yeah, and the other thing is commit to it. If you are not 100% committed to it, people are going to smell that. And you need to bring your authentic selves to work. Like Jarad alluded to before, part of what we do at Epic, one of our catchphrases is deliberately different. Because we are, as you may or may not have noticed, a little bit deliberately different. But you have to commit to it. When you do it, you have to believe in it too. So it's got to resonate with you also.
Cool. So I'm getting the times up. So I think we'll move on unless there's any questions. Again,
plenty of questions, but we'll come back to that.
Come back to some of those as well. And Naeem, feel free, as we discussed, if you want to jump in with any of those key questions that you think are awesome, then let us know. The next topic is remote collaboration. So this is something that, how do you do something that is inherently together? How do you do it when we're apart? Yeah. So I'll reference some of the things we just talked about, like Deft and Power Start are really good ways to start thinking about that and use some of those techniques we talked about. And we haven't talked about tools yet, but I do notice that it's one of the higher voters of what tools are you going to use for the session. And again, who's got access to them, who's used them, all of those type of things. And you don't necessarily need to have everyone au fait with the tools, but there's lots of really great tools out there, collaboration, asynchronous, lots of different types, depending on what your session is. So it might be just casual conversation of using Slack, and I'll get to talk a little later, but it could be also something that, what is the collaboration tool that we're going to use? And we'll look at some of those in a second.
For me, one of the most effective, maybe not a tool, but one of the most effective things you can have for a good facilitated collaborative session. I don't know where he is on your screens, but he's sitting over there for me. And I'm sitting over here, probably for him. If anything goes wrong, because this is remote and this is internet, and you know, when everybody gets home at this time and everybody's on Netflix and iPads and everything else, shit can go wrong and something might drop out. And if one of you disappears, the other one's there to pick up the slack while the other one's frantically on the keyboard. So if you're running something that you can't afford to just suddenly disappear off, make sure you've got a contingency and you're pairing with somebody. That's powerful.
Yeah, so I'll talk about one really quickly. So on that, I ran a big room retro across geographies. So it was Australia based, in India and in China simultaneously. So 500 people across all of those locations, just as many people in India as we had here. We sent a facilitator over there and they were able to co-facilitate with us. We had plans A, B and C if we lost internet in any area, which we obviously did at certain times. We got to the point where we broke out to our teams talking, where teams were literally going down to plan D, which was then thinking on the feet, getting iPhones and calling, FaceTiming the rest of their team, because we had dispersed teams in other countries, and going, hey, here's our board, great, which one do you want us to move, and having talks. We got to the point where in India, we had a power outage. you can't plan for power outages. But what do you do in that situation? Again, that comes back to adaptability. Think on your feet. You don't just stop the session. You go, what are we going to do? How do we make this work?
Yeah, and you know, you've got a lot of people on the session with you. Be vulnerable, be open, own it, make a joke of it, and people will come to the party and help you get through it as well. Jarad, I just want to answer one of the questions somebody asked. Do we have to announce that it's an icebreaker? No, you don't. If it's effective, it'll work. Yep, cool.
Yeah.
We've also got on here, preparation is key, right? Preparation is key. So if you've taken care of the little things up front, you can focus on the conversation, or you can focus on the big stuff during the session.
Yeah, so definitely be realistic on what you can achieve as well. So one of the things we've found out is, particularly with like a training session, for example, it will take at least double the amount of time that it would if you had people in person. So at the start of all of this, back in where we were in March, we moved all of our all of our training that we ran in person online. So that was obviously a big shift for part of the organisation to do that. And that took a lot of work. But again, being adaptable, making the change, seeing where, okay, we're gonna need to do something like this. But what it meant is we had for example, day workshop, we ran it and it took much longer. So then you have to go, okay, so we've got one course that we've got, which is a 3-day course, usually in person. How do you do that remotely? So we got to the point where we were running 5 days of half days to get through that, and we still weren't doing it and working out how do you make that work. So everything will take longer is my point, and take that on board of how do you plan for that. So you might say, do you know what? Prioritize. These are important things I want to get through and want to make sure I get an answer on those. If we get to those, fantastic. Call it out at the start. It's a stretch.
Jared, there's a couple of questions here. If you don't mind, I'll just read them out. We got one about how do we go about encouraging people to have their video on for a workshop, and also how do we handle silences in between questions or in general. The video one, you can easily sort that out with a social agreement. You're not going to force everybody to put their video on. Some people are not comfortable with it. But absolutely, if people sign up to a social agreement at the beginning, and one of them is have your video as much as possible, the majority will have it on. Like I say, you can't force people. The silences are fine. The silences might just mean people are thinking. And if it goes for too long, move to the next thing. Or, you know, reaffirm the question, or re-articulate it, or just double check that people are understanding what you're saying, because maybe it's how you're asking a question. So there's many reasons there may be silences. Yeah,
silences are really powerful. There's a difference between a pregnant pause or people going, oh, hang on, I'm listening now. Sorry, were you asking me the question? Versus I haven't said anything for a minute and you're wondering if people are on mute or not. But it's a powerful technique to also use. So I say, know your tools and know your techniques that you're trying to use, and just be conscious of them. And even if it's a matter of going, I'm going to try one new thing per session, and then you build upon it that way.
I've got a really good question here, if you don't mind, mate. There's one here that goes from anonymous attendee. I always interrupt people when I hear them say something I know is wrong, in quotes, and correct it immediately. How do I stop myself from doing this? That's pretty awesome self-awareness, by the way. You're already doing it. If you sign yourself up, for me, if I was doing it, I would sign myself up to my own little private social agreement, and I would seek to understand rather than discredit. Just because it doesn't agree with your particular perspective doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, and you already understand that. So I would seek to understand what's being said before you have anything else to say about it.
Yeah. Another technique that you're probably already using, particularly if you're in an agile world, is things like retrospectives. Retrospectives is a great way to get further buy-in. You know, what wasn't working? Well, not everyone was on video, so it's really hard to read. And I noticed one of the questions was around body language. Really hard to read body language. I'll ask a rhetorical question here because I know you guys can't feed back. But from a facilitation perspective, you've got a number of different elements to it. You've got your body language, you've got tone of voice, and you've got what you say. Does anybody know what the percentages are? And I'm sure someone at home is going, oh, me, and others are going, oh.
I always make it up, so it sounds good anyway.
But it's in the vicinity, body language is in the vicinity of 60%. So what people take away is 60%. So straight away, if you haven't got video on, multiple people don't have video on, straight away, you're losing over half of what's going on there. The rest of it is made up of tone and what is said. Tone is actually, I think, about in the 20s, mid-20s somewhere. And what is actually said is sort of in the vicinity of about 10%, thereabouts. So you might polish the perfect script of this is what I'm going to say and all the rest of it. That might only be 10% of what's going on. So great question. How do you read body language? Obviously video needs to be on in the first place. So social agreements, those type of things are great to start to establish that. Just encourage people, call it out and go, you know, I think I noticed a lot of people don't have video on. Guys, if you can, I really appreciate it if you can, you know, put your videos on, because it really helps me. I'm sitting here and I'm kind of thinking like I'm talking to myself. Am I? You know, is anyone out there? Have a bit of fun with that. You know, prod the elephant in the room a little bit, you know, and again, depend on your audience of how much you prod and how directly you do that prodding.
There is another great question here, Jarad, I might pose to you and get your perspective first. What do you recommend on how to build trust with a stakeholder in a virtual environment?
Great question. So I would always go back to what we said off the top. So the human connection is key. So just as I did, you know, I talked about my son and my wife and things like that. That's me trying to create human connection, as opposed to you guys going, hey, there's a guy in a stupid shirt and a silly hat talking to me about face-to-face in a virtual world. Well, I'm starting to create that I'm human. I'm in Melbourne, I'm in lockdown. So you go, oh, there's probably some motivations there in terms of, man, he must be struggling if you're not in lockdown. For example, you know, I don't know what Qatar's lockdowns are at the moment, but I'm imagining it's about 40 degrees and you're out enjoying yourself during the day. It's cold, wet. We're in lockdown down here in Melbourne. So how do you create those human connections there? A technique that I've also used is, I've got a window here, is literally I turn my camera around and show you, this is what I'm looking at outside. So if you see me glancing off while we're in a session because I'm thinking, I'm actually looking at X, Y, and Z. So I've got a bit of a city view of Melbourne. I live in a city, in the city, and I can see lights of the city, which I was going to turn around and show you guys, but you can't see very well. Okay.
Yeah, good answer, mate. For me, it's trust. Sorry, not trust, patience. Patience is what I would use as well, because it's very similar to a physical environment. Trust isn't just accorded randomly. It's something that's built and it's something that's earned. And it's normally through displaying your capability, getting runs on the board, and taking the time to do the stuff that you need to do with your stakeholder, right? Because it's very difficult to accord trust in the first place. And it's quite easy to lose. So I wouldn't blag your way through something, especially when you're trying to build it. Own it, be authentic. If there is something that you can't do, figure out how to do it and work with them in whatever you're doing. There's a multitude of ways to doing it, but that's how I would approach it. But above all, a bit of patience.
Yeah, we talked about warm-ups before. I think it takes time to create trust. Some is going to be quicker than others. And it might be within a session, you've got certain stakeholders that are just difficult and you know it's going to take time and you're not going to get them this session. You may not get them the next session. Maybe you're planning for the session after that. So what groundwork are you going to do now, and just keep building upon that. I really like the human side of things. So we talked about warm-up techniques before. One of them I like is just asking the question, what, particularly in the current environment, what got you through the weekend? Let's do a show and tell of what, you know, just starting off. Go get an item that reflected what your weekend was like, or what got you through the weekend, or what gets you through the weeks. And people will bring back coffee. This is getting me through the day. They'll bring back, I don't know, a child, a pet. Here's some stupid little, I've had someone bring in basically a voodoo doll and go, a voodoo doll's getting me through. And I'm like, okay. I've had, you know, people will bring, here's a bottle of gin. It's getting me through today because I'm already on it, you know, whatever the case may be. So that brings, and for me, it's very much humour. I've got a pretty dry sense of humour, but I'll try and just layer that in, and not everybody gets it, so I need to temper that sometimes.
Have you got a sense of humour, mate?
Apparently.
What's Slido telling us?
So on Slido, nice segue. I'm getting the times up. The next one is tools.
Yep.
So Tubbsy, I might get you just to start, because I'm just going to bring up some slides, even though I lied off the top and said we don't use slides.
We do have 3 slides. So the thing to remember about tools is that it's how you use them, and it is just a collaboration tool. You are emulating a physical environment, but what you're looking to do is get an outcome from it. What you're looking to do is draw information onto something that you can collaborate on. So there are things that we use. There is a thing called Mural. There's a thing called, I don't know how to pronounce it, Miro. Jamboard is very basic, but it gets the job done. Lucidchart is another one. Here's something Jarad prepared earlier.
Yeah, so I've just got a couple of those here. So here's a Mural. This is I think it's a Miro. I'm not sure what this one is.
That one's Lucidchart. Lucidchart.
There you go. And we've got Jamboard here. And that's actually a screenshot. And I've done that on purpose because I just want to talk about it specifically. So this is Mural.
actual clients, by the way, which is why we've made them illegible.
Yeah, some of that, I'm happy for you to read some of this, but some of it is because this is, if anyone's used Mural, and I'm sure some of you had, for those that haven't, Mural is basically, if you think of slides being A4, Mural is basically writing on a billboard. It's just the biggest canvas you've ever seen in your life, and it allows you to put a whole lot, you might fit 30 slides effectively worth of information on a page, and it allows you to scroll in and move yourself around that. It's also a really great collaboration tool where you can do things like voting. So this is a mural that we did with a C-suite that we were taking them through, and we were trying to get them to the point, hence that sort of squiggly line. It's sort of showing, hey, we've got a bit of movement. We're starting at one. We want to end up down the bottom. They were notoriously bad at timekeeping and decision-making, so we kind of drove them. This was an hour session. This is something that we would usually run anywhere between half a day and 2 days, or maybe a day actually at most. We squeezed it into an hour, and we took the key elements and go, we want to get them to make decisions around this. And this was actually our first engagement with them, like literally the first time we met them, a whole C-suite. And it was about making an impact and getting them to come out of that session and go, I don't know what happened there, but we just made a whole lot of decisions. And you go, great. And that was the feedback we got. So we started with just some intro, what's the brief, give them a context setting, which was this bit up the top here. We moved over here and we had here's some good techniques, sliders. So these are just a question. The first question was, how aligned are you as a group? And each of these dots has a name on it, and it's just one of those C levels. And we just in real time put, this is where you are, 1 to 10, highly aligned versus not aligned, and where you are. And they were relatively aligned. That's what they said. We then said, what's your appetite? And we captured comments, and again, sliders for this. Down here at number 3, we got them to vote. So you can see, hopefully there's these little yellow dots on these post-its. They're just coins. We gave them each 2 coins and said, you're going to vote on what are the drivers that you're trying to respond to from a change perspective. From that, we led over here, which was, we're going to take those top votes or those top elements that you voted, and they're going to be the key things that we start looking at. And then from that, we can start to look at what is our engagement and what does success look like for us. So we got all of that out of an hour with them. So they walked away going, we've made a whole lot of decisions. We realized we're pretty aligned. We've got a sort of disparate view on how radical we want our change to be. But these are our drivers we've agreed to. And this is how we know success is with this engagement with these guys. Wow.
Yeah. This one here this one's a tough one actually, because this is a process. The product that we're building is an actual process, and this particular process impacts around about 150,000 people. Now, what you're looking at here is something that we call big room planning, and what we've done at Epic is we've taken stuff from a bunch of frameworks and put them together and created a bespoke version of a tribal model. And what we do in this big room planning is we plan for the next 3 months. And what we do is we bring each of the squads or the teams into a session with some pre-prepared stuff. So you might recognize how some of this stuff is done, but we bring them in with some pre-prepared stuff. And what we talk about is the stuff that we can't get done in the office. The clue is in the name, it's big room planning. It's what do we do when we get together in a room that we can't normally do? What's the stuff between the lines? It's about figuring out what the problems are and solving them in a single day, not finding them along the way over the next 3 months and then getting sideswiped by them at the end. What we come into this with is an understanding of all of the people that need to be there, all of the stakeholders that need to be there, everything that they're contributing. Every single person who comes to these deserves to be there and has a part to play. And additionally, those red lines are the dependencies that we're pulling out. At the end of it, what everybody walks away with is a plan, a solid plan for the next 3 months. The next 3 months is not the final destination, but we have a much longer roadmap, of course. But this is the understanding of strategically what we're going to do over the next 3 months to hit our targets. Additionally, we also have the measures of success that we're consistently reviewing against to work out whether we have to pivot or not. And yes, mate?
I was just going to say, and again, this is something that's done in real time. So it's a collaboration tool, you're building this, and you might not complete it. You might get to a stage where you're pretty good and you might do some cleanup later. But these are tools that you can use in real time during your sessions. Now, again, depending on the session as we talked about. I'll just say really finally, just because I am conscious of time, this is a Jamboard. So some of you might have used Jamboard. This is a screenshot because I wanted you to see the whole screen.
Yep.
And this is just a collaboration tool where we had a group of about a dozen people, and we were creating real life Post-it notes. And then at the same time, we're all trying to draw to link different bits and pieces. So it looks like a mess. That's kind of what Jamboard is. It's kind of a really sort of dirty whiteboard Post-it note sort of tool. And you can use it, differently to that. But here it was a really good tool to be able to use in that setting. And you can use each of these tools differently. But again, the more au fait you are with a range of tools, you may not use them all, but the more you can have in your toolkit, the better. And there's obviously a whole lot of different types of tools. We're talking about collaboration tools here. You can have asynchronous tools. You obviously got Slack, for example. It's a good way to chat, with people. All of those different things, as well as obviously your virtual facilitation and all of those type of tools.
Yeah. Additionally, looking at that one there, it doesn't have to be fancy, right? This is not about the tools that we're using. It's about the conversation and the information and the connections that we're able to elicit using the stuff that we put on those tools.
Yeah.
I want to read out a question before we go on to the next slide, Jarad, if I can. This one is pretty good. I made my career, quote, I made my career in the 80s and I'm a traditionalist. You lads look fun and lively and all, but this medium is too tank-fangled and I distrust it, end quotes. Anonymous exec. How do you keep the different generations together and encourage the non-digital natives, like the one I made up above, to contribute? Because they can often hold on to some important knowledge. Do you want me to have a go while you think about it?
Go, mate. Yeah, sorry, I've just...
Yeah. So for me, it alludes back to what I just talked about before. The tools and all the tangle-fangled technology is really just a medium for us to draw it out. And again, it comes back to patience and creating that connection. So depending when you're coming at it from a BA perspective, taking the time prior to a session, taking the time in a session, potentially allocating a few people who might be spending some time with that particular person to walk them through some stuff, and maybe even finding something like a Jamboard, where Jamboard is super simple, right? And if they're on a remote hangout or a remote session with everybody, they can use a Jamboard, or get them to take photos with their phone of Post-its if they prefer to use Post-its and physical media like that. Whatever works for them, just figure out what that is and help them along with that.
I'm getting time again, and I know we've talked about this probably for a little I can see the next one, and I'm conscious of overall time as well, is cultural sustenance. And I'm just going to talk about this really quickly, and then if we need to move on, we can. For me, this is just about focusing on your own well-being as well as the well-being of, if you're leaders, your teams, and if you're not leaders, everyone's a leader in a certain element, but the people that you are working with. So there's obviously the mental health aspect, which is obviously really important at the moment. You're focusing on your physical as well. So how are you creating that? And the virtual. One of the things we did do is when we sort of back in March, we created something that we called a Thrival guide. Not survival, it's about thriving. And one of the elements in there, we talked about personal well-being, because it's really, one, it's close to our heart, but two, it's pretty important. I'm just going to talk about really quickly, I mentioned the elements in that, because I think there's some really good stuff there that often gets forgotten. And it goes to everything we're talking about working in a face-to-face in a virtual world. So they are self-reflection. So providing time to actually go, this is how I'm feeling, and this is how people are feeling. The next one's about filling your cup, which is about what gets me going. I'm getting drained all the time. You'll get to the point where you are, in cycling parlance, the Tour de France is meant to be on at the moment, you get into the red. And at that point you crack and you're done. So how do you keep refilling your cup? What works for you? Is it playing with Lego? Is it watching Netflix? Is it playing with your children? Is it mucking around with your pets? Is it, I don't know, having a glass of wine? Whatever works for you, make sure that you're focusing on those elements. Focus on your connections as well. People need people. And even if you're introvert, using a stereotype, or someone likes to, I'm pretty happy by myself, you're still going to have certain people that you want to reach out to. Again, part of filling your cup as well. Being open. How do you create an environment where people can be open? And you can find out that actually I'm not a 10 today. In fact, I'm not even a 7. I'm a 2. I feel crap. So if you're needing something from me, you're not going to get a whole lot. Separating your space, creating boundaries, really tough. So I'm working upstairs at the moment. My wife's downstairs. Physical barrier. But at the same time, if I hear my child, cry or something, I'm like, oh, I got to get drawn over there. Does lunch just blend? Does the end of the day blend into suddenly it's dark outside? So how do you create some boundaries for yourself and go, do you know what? I need to get up and move around. You know, I'm noticing it myself. My legs are killing me at the end of the day because I've hardly got up. I'm like, I need to physically get up and do stuff. Yeah. And the last one's about getting stuff done, which is focusing on that being purposeful and doing good stuff rather than just doing a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Because doing purposeful stuff, you're going to feel a whole lot better for it. And just focusing and ticking them off. Did that, did that, did that. I'm going to feel much better doing 2 things than juggling 10 things and not finishing any of them.
Yeah, and that's a really underrated one, right? That personal well-being thing in the survival guide, because you can't really look after anyone else or anything else without looking after yourself too. And you might feel like you can operate at this level when you're feeling at that level, but very few people can do that. So make sure you look after yourself. And shameless plug, I think the survival guide is available as a free download on our site, isn't it?
Yes. Yep. Let's go to the site. Have a look at articles.
Yeah.
We'll try and include it in the link. And that wasn't meant to be a plug. Just it's some good stuff.
You've got to look after yourself, right? You've got to look after yourself. And the more information you can find on that. Cool. Naeem, how are we going? I just wanted to double check because as you can tell, we can probably keep talking.
I wish we could just keep continuing. So let's continue till 7:15 and then have a 15-minute Q&A where we will just go through the questions. So probably we can go for 1 or 2 more topics.
All right. Where are we? What's next? We've talked about that.
I'm going to check with Mark on a message and see how he's going with the drawing and if he's ready to show us anything. I don't have to do a message, I'll just say it out loud.
I think you just said that. While you're doing that, I'll have a look at Slido. So I think we just talked about cultural sustenance. I think the next one was want something around human connection. We've talked a lot about human connection.
Yep.
I'm going all right, Tubbsy. Almost having a meltdown.
let us know when you want to show us what you got, mate.
Do you want to show us now, Mark, how you're going, or do you want to?
Yeah. Okay. I'll quickly share my screen.
So Mark's going to show us what he's been working on.
Cool, man.
So the power in visual facilitation. I went to a course that Mark ran called Bicablo, and one of the things he made us do was listen to a TED talk in like half the speed. And I couldn't even come close to keeping up. So this is phenomenal what he's doing here. But what did it say, Mark? It said when information density is high, the doodle is the best or something like that. Like drawing, visual facilitation communicates high information density. Is that right, Mark? Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. It engages all modalities. So you take on the information a lot easier. Although I'm really having a meltdown because you're going so fast. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay, mate. You're doing a really great job. And there was a girl on the course as well. There was a lady on the course who, at the very beginning of the course, said she couldn't draw for any money, and she turned out to be one of the best of us too. So if you can draw a straight line, like Mark says, you can draw some pictures, and you can refine it a little bit to where you get to a point where you can convey the message that you're trying to convey.
I have a question for Mark from Kelly. Mark, what are some of the accessibility factors we can keep in mind when doing illustration in workshops, whether it's digital or old school?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really key thing, especially when you're going fast. The key for legibility is to really, you don't have to go super fast. Like, it's okay to have pauses and have breaks. It's actually very powerful if you're drawing or writing on a board. You don't have to be going super fast. So it's just, you just need to be really present and really mindful not to go too quickly, because the faster you go, the worse it gets. But it's obviously practicing your speed allows you to really keep up. And you don't have to be an artist. I also teach vocabulary, which is obviously what Brendon's done. And that really is just about teaching how to convey information very quickly with quite simple characters.
So I hope this doesn't come across as a shameless plug, because it's absolutely not meant to be. For example, because Mark was just talking about drawing. So I'm going to hold this up. This is really terrible, and this is absolutely not planned at all. But you'll see here we've got some lines. One of the courses we do, which is actually virtual facilitator. So if you ask the best question, you actually get to come to this. But we actually do a section which is actually drawing. So one of your takeaways afterwards is you can start to draw and do some basic vocabulary sort of type of thing. So we just start with some lines. We start with some shapes, some shark fins. Why are we doing shark fins? Well, shark fins become call-out boxes, for example. We look at some basic shapes which become a robot. We look at some basic people. You know, putting some of these elements together, how do you draw people? And then you get to the point where you're starting to bring all these together and you can start to create a visualization. So you've got people with call-outs and all of those type of things. Basic tools, as we know, practice makes perfect. It's just a way to start that muscle and build that muscle because, you know, often, you know, we haven't drawn from a long period of time. I'm just starting to, again, one, through vocabulary, but two, my son's starting to get to the point of going, great, crayons, let's draw on the floor. And I'm like, let's not draw on the floor. But the drawing aspect of things. So you start to build that muscle. And once you get a bit of confidence, you can start to do these things and help to tell the story. That, as I said, was unplanned. It was just kind of sitting there in the pile of paper. Pile of paper I've got, which is why it looks so terrible.
Oh, look here at the top of my pile of paper is the drawing I prepared earlier.
Yeah, I would have cleaned that up a little. The last of the, from a Slido perspective, is...
can I just answer this one question that's at the top there, if you don't mind? Because George asked, is there value in running 2 cameras for broadcast, Auslan and audio description? The reason I wanted to answer that is because at the moment, or just very, very recently, I've been working with a guy that is about 90-something% deaf. And he is a very, very talented, very strong Scrum Master. And he started cycling into big room plannings. And big room plannings are chaotic. And we were having about 100 people in these things. And over time, what we realized is that absolutely there was value in running these audio descriptions for him, because what we would do is we would have one of those microphones that you put on your head normally. But as everybody was talking and playing back stuff, we would hand it around. Everybody would hand it around. And I mean, sometimes the audio description is a little bit dubious at best, but the value that he got out of that was phenomenal because he was super focused. He is very, very good at what he does, but he just couldn't make sense of the chaos that was going on around him until we started taking the time to do that. And it was a simple thing and it was an easy thing. And it was just phenomenal to watch how everybody rallied around that. So absolutely, I think there's value in that.
Yeah, and I would say that to me, and I don't know that situation, but those type of things, the power is not in the information. The power is in the engagement, the collaboration that's along in the team. You take away some words from that, fantastic, and you've got a bit of context. But what you've built through that over a course of the big room planning, a couple of days potentially, massively powerful.
Yeah, because from high-performing teams, or most high-performing teams, come from a sense of empathy, right? And that was hugely empathetic.
Okay, so just looking at Slido, I see we've got a couple left, but the next one there that I can see, and I'm sure I'll be called out as wrong, is actually Bring the Fun, which is actually a really nice way to finish, I think. And obviously we've talked a fair bit about that, and you notice obviously we're pretty passionate about Bring the Fun because it's a great way to create that human connection. But I would say just at its most simplest level, get out of your comfort zone. And I'll temper that. Some people might already be pretty far to whatever end of the spectrum it is, the fun spectrum. You don't necessarily want them to go further. They might be too extreme. But I'll just say it's always good to try, and I think it's a great growth opportunity at the moment. I think we've got fantastic opportunities personally, as teams, as organisations at the moment. And I'd say just get out of your comfort zone. And it's the same thing for an organisation. Just push the boundaries a bit, because if you're not going to do it now you're going to do it, because it's a great opportunity to try something completely different that you might go, wow, revenue stream from there, where did that come from? So I do the same thing with Bring the Fun. Just step a little bit outside your comfort zone. So hats, shirts, that's just easy, stupid stuff. If you've got the right team or you want to create it, great way to start.
Yeah, that's exactly right, mate.
I'll also say, sorry, I didn't know if you were pausing for me or if you were just taking a breath.
I was getting my mental train back on track because it went off track a second, but it's back on track. So yeah, I'll go after you.
I was just going to say, and embrace all the stuff that happens around you. Like, you see YouTube and Facebook videos and stuff like that about people on not understanding. I saw a question before about technophiles, not understanding how to use VC, and they're on the laptop and they decide to go to the bathroom. that's been doing the rounds. You know, you've got pets, and I'm surprised. I've got 2 cats, or we've got 2 cats. I'm surprised one of them hasn't jumped up at some point, because he tends to do that. How do you embrace those things? We talked about human connection. You get a pet jump up, and someone else who's a really hard person to try and engage. I talked about them before. You've got some just really tough people, nuts to crap. And they go, oh, you've got a dog. I've got a dog too. Wow. And suddenly you cannot plan for that, and it breaks down all barriers, and you're great to go from there. So embrace all of those things, you know, naked housemates in the background, all of that type of stuff.
I'm not embracing a naked housemate in the background, mate. But again, like fun, does that mean let's go skiing? Does that mean let's go to Waterworld for the weekend? Well, maybe, but not while we're working, right? So the fun is a different type of fun that you're having while you're working. And like Jared's saying, just embrace a little bit of getting out of your comfort zone, whether it be a scavenger hunt that you create or just something that is different, that is away from the norm. And then you'll get back to the stuff that you're doing, but it'll be a little bit different. It'll be a little bit more jovial. There'll be a little bit more interaction from a human level. Yeah,
and provide, you know, create, you know, communities of practice, if you will, of how do you share all that stuff. Hey, I found this technique that really works. This is awesome. I've never heard of it before. You know, I've seen someone else goes, yeah, I've been using that for a year. Why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
You know, anything you can do there to share all these type of things. And some people might go, oh, that's a bit rubbish, but it's a great way to, again, creating it. And I'll go back to that quote that we said off the top of the day, on the top of the evening, for me anyway. You know, people forget what you said. They'll forget what you did, but they won't forget how you make them feel. So you create that type of, you know, bring the fun. And I'll use one quick example here. I worked in an organisation, a big financial institution, huge risk department, as you'd imagine. They were doing showcases, and I had a tribe, and I had one team, and they said, you know, we've got C-suite coming to our showcase, and we cannot get engagement. And I said, well, just think a bit outside of the box. And so they went away, and we had a bit of a chat about it, and they came up with some ideas. And one of them came up with an idea. We came to the showcase, and they baked a cake, and the cake was in layers, so different colours for different layers, and that aligned to a PowerPoint presentation, which I don't do PowerPoint presentations, but anyway, it aligned to this because they had this risk set up. And what they did is, as they worked through it, they cut the cake and they showed this. So 6 months later, so at the time, everyone's like, I don't, risk slides, what cake? We've got cake. I got cake, awesome. So 6 months later, you had the chief risk officer was still talking about the showcase that had the cake. Did he remember what the content was? He remembered a little bit about it, but he remembered the people, the team, and he remembered that he got cake. So what environment can you create? And that's how they got engagement. And then he showcases, I'm coming to every showcase because I could get cake again.
If there's cake, yeah. Yeah, awesome. Naeem, how are we going?
I think it's time to look at the Q&A. And actually, I'm happy for you to pick up the questions from the Q&A. Just scroll on the top. That has the list of the most liked question. And at the same time, if I can please ask everyone to like the questions you want Brendon and Jarad to answer, so that it helps us to prioritize. So let's go for another 12 minutes, and then I'll take over.
Jarad, how long do we need for Mojo?
30 seconds.
Okay. So the next top question we got is, Agile ceremonies were meant to bring physical collaboration and fun during planning sessions. Lots of people are demotivated to do these ceremonies remotely, even using tools and warm-up games. What do you suggest to bring these events to life while in lockdown?
Wow, you've given us constraints there, haven't you? Look, there's lots of different things you can do. So I get people moving. So things that I like to see, even things like, you know, I talked about voting before. So it is work-related. It's not a warm-up technique, but it's a way to get people to use. So it may not be, for example, a full big room planning, but you can get techniques there where if you're using the right tools, you can get them to do that. It may not even be a tool, so you may not be using a mural or something like that, but even just as simple as you've got people on screen and you're talking to them. And even if you don't have video, you can always say, guys, just give us a thumbs up and thumbs down, and I'll take those that I see. So then majority rules. So if you haven't got your video on, you don't get a vote. So there's ways to do that type of thing.
And another thing, what you can do is move it outside of the ceremonies that you're having, turn it into something that is a connection point. So at Epic, especially when we all went into lockdown, we created global connection points where we could get together, talk about anything really, just connect to, because it was a scary time, right? I know I worked with a product owner who used to arrange on a Friday afternoon a bake-off for all of the parents with kids, and they would have a bake-off remotely. And what that slowly does, again, is start to change the mindset around it and start to create those connections, which means that even though you are demotivated, you are connecting with the people that you are connecting with outside of ceremonies as well. Not everybody is going to do it, but what you will find is you'll get a groundswell of support for this sort of thing.
Yeah, I'll be honest, it's only really limited by your imagination. Like, you can go as far as you want. Like, I know a team, this was relayed to me, so it's only hearsay. I know a team, disengaged team, so the team, small team, and we had a baker. The person who was pretty engaged was a baker. So they baked muffins for everyone. And then they actually, I don't know if this was allowed. It was within the state, so no state borders were crossed. But they actually posted them, muffins, to everybody. So it's not the point of, I got a muffin that's now 3 days old. The point is, hey, suddenly you've created this connection and it's funny and all the rest of it. And, you know, one person might be brave enough to eat the muffin after that point in time, and you don't see them again for the next few days because they're out. But it's, again, a way, like, you can take this as far as you want. Again, choose your context, and it's hard to talk to unless you know specific context of what's going to be relevant and the people involved. And indeed, as I said off the top, what resonates for you. I would say go a little bit outside your comfort zone, but think outside of the box. You know, there are lots of senses. You can use music, you can use backgrounds, you can tone down or tone up as much as you like. So just try different things until you crack the nut. Use it as a challenge. I can't believe I'm going to do this. I'm going to quote Rocky in terms of, you know, I must break you. You know, it's a nut to be broken. There's my challenge.
Yeah. The next one we've got is, how do you address someone's tone in a meeting when you can't see their face? Example, someone comes across as angry or seems like they may be attacking someone's comment. For me, this is one of those ones where I'm going to go, it depends. It depends on the meeting. It depends on the people, if you know them. It depends on what you may know about them or not know about them. Probably, if I were to answer from a personal perspective, one of the last things I would do is call it out publicly, because that might exacerbate the situation. If I knew the person who had their video off, I'd potentially hang out to them or message them behind the scenes, see if everything was okay. And try and get them to tone it down a bit, especially if it's disrupting, if it's deliberately obtuse. There's so many potential reasons for this, you know.
They may not even realise it. It might be just a quick Slack, even a text message to go, hey man, that came across pretty, you know, aggressive or whatever. And I'll go, oh, gee, sorry, didn't mean that. And go, and then I'll come back and go, hey, that might have sounded aggressive. I didn't mean it to be that. It might be as simple as that.
Yeah. And, you know, you want to be concerned for them as well, because you don't know where it's coming from. Especially, I think, like we were saying in the previous one, we're in lockdown. This is weird, right? It's a weird time, and people are reacting differently and feeling probably under attack by the world or whatever it might be. So we've got to have a lot of empathy for what's going on.
Yeah, I would say create space. So try and create some space. Like if it's a team you're working with all the time, or a group of people, or whatever it happens to be, can you create some space? Like it could be, you know, pulse checks that you're trying to do, what frequency, once a week, once a day, whatever's relevant. And again, the first time you go, do you know what, I'm a 10. Oh yeah, everything's rosy. It's a watermelon. It's green on the outside. I'm actually not. I'm red inside. Am I 2?
Yeah.
But over time, you might start to change that. You've created that trust that we talked about at the start. And they'll start, you know, they might go, and it might be you leading. And again, it might be you just, what's the word, tempering your truth. And go, do you know what? I'm actually pretty good today. I'm a 7, but I'm going to call out that I'm a 4 because I'm going to get a reaction. And say, guys, I'm struggling a little bit because we're in lockdown. You know, I've had a bad weekend, I haven't slept, blah, 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 whatever it happens to be. And that is a way potentially as an input for someone else to go, do you know what? You went first. So it's just things like that as well.
And seek to understand it's coming from somewhere, right? There may be a grain of truth to it. And it's our knee-jerk reaction as human beings is to get our back up and be defensive as well. So just try and understand where it's coming from. The other one we've got, yeah, mate.
So just really quickly, so I mentioned it before about, you know, what got you through the weekend. And I've had someone who literally bought, and that's why I mentioned it, a bottle of gin. And it was the right environment because we're in a good space, because people are bringing stuff to dig into that and go, hey, why? And they go, I just had a really bad week and blah, blah. Yeah. And we got, scrap the rest of the meeting. You end up talking about that for half an hour because they're comfortable to do so in the environment. And awesome. They may, you know, literally got messaged afterwards going, thanks, Jarad. I feel so much, thanks team. I felt so much better afterwards just because we haven't managed to have a chat about it.
as you guys may be picking up, we're in the people business, right? We're in the people business. A lot of this talks to how we relate, how we connect to each other as human beings. The work does come. There is a lot of work that gets done, but we find that it becomes a lot more effective, a lot more powerful, a lot more focused, and a lot more value driven as well if we connect with each other.
To me, it's just part of your toolkit. You've got your skills that you've built up over time. I'm really great at, facilitation. I'm really great at eliciting requirements, whatever it happens to be. There's a toolkit for that. And there's a toolkit for the people side of things as well. And there's a toolkit for a whole lot of others. So how do you build that complete toolkit out? In some elements might be lax or might be in areas that haven't needed to be nurtured before. And now you go, do you know what? Really need to build out some of this. So I'm going to take some tips or warm-ups that you talked about or things that I haven't done previously and try them and see how that works for me.
Yep, people remember how you made them feel. Here's another one. My manager gave me feedback to improve my collaboration with the squads that I needed to build social capital with the team members. What does this mean? And how can I do this when I have a large number of people to do it with? I support two squads, approximately 12 folkish. Yeah,
right. Yeah. For me, social capital is just some of the stuff that we've been talking about. How do you create that outside of work type of thing? So how do you create that connection, that human connection around some of the things we've been talking about? It's sort of putting what do I need from them or what do they need from me to the side. And we still need to do that, but I'm going to build this other stuff, and if I can find out, as I said, they've got a pet. Oh, great. I've got a dog too. Great. Maybe we can talk dog, or maybe we can talk camping, or what you did. You brought a bottle of wine to what got me through the weekend. Hey, I know that bottle of wine. Hey, are you a wine, connoisseur, lack of a better word? No, I just went to Dan, got this. Okay, great blocker. Okay, how do I move on to the next thing to create some social capital with them? And if you're doing it in a situation where it's a team, others are going to get something out of it, even if it's not directed at them.
Yep. Here's another one. I'm going to read this one out because this is kind of something that's near and dear to me. I've developed a hatred towards meetings since we started to work remotely, because now all kitchen corridor conversations have now become 30-minute meetings, thus filling up your whole day. It's moved. I'm expecting a lot of stakeholders feeling the same, let alone sit in an hour-long or a 2-hour workshop. How do we get people excited about joining a meeting remotely? So for me, the clue is in the word meetings there. What we're doing, what you're probably finding is you're having all of these meetings about work that you're going away to do. What we can do, and what I'm finding very effective, is to repurpose these meetings to be intent-based, outcome-based, and they are the work. Don't add meetings on top of meetings to talk about meetings to do some work. Make those sessions that you're having outcome-based and create something out of them and start to cut them down. Also, if you're having a half-hour meeting and it takes 15 minutes, cut it at 15 minutes. You don't need 30 minutes.
So I definitely also recommend setting up meetings that aren't half an hour or whatever the default of the system you're using is, half hour, hour. Make them 17 minutes or something like that, or make them extreme. Make them 15 minutes. Because people are going to come to that going, 15 minutes meeting, because we're going to, and in the invite, we're going to talk about this, or we're going to get to this point where I need a decision on X, Y, and Z. And people can go, great, I can see what it is off the top. And I've mentioned power, start, and def, and those type of things off before. This is the purpose. This is what you're going to get. This is why you're here. Bang at the end of the meeting, and we're going to do it shortly. Meeting Mojo. Did we? Yes, we did. Like lots of techniques there. Get people to use NPS. Start doing that. Just sow the seed and go, guys, I want you to do NPS this meeting. And if there's anything 6 or below, you don't have to come to my next meeting. And people are going to go, great. At the same time, they're going to use it for the next crap meeting they go to and go, I'm going to NPS this. And I'm not going to go.
Another thing that we do at Epic and have done for years is use things like Slack, right? So we've all been remote most of the time anyway. And most of us constantly remain in contact through short Slack messages, channels, whatever we talk about, whatever's necessary. And then if we need to get together for longer periods, we'll have a session on Hangouts or Zoom, or, if it's really important, we used to fly and see each other.
Yeah, have a meeting if you need to have a meeting. If you don't, another way is great. Have a virtual coffee with someone. I just need to talk to 2 people, great guys, because it's creating space for them as well. Why don't we block out 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it happens to be, and we'll have a virtual coffee. And literally, we'll get a coffee or a cup of tea or whatever, and we can have a chat. We shoot the breeze, but we can also talk about what I need to talk about. And for them, they're going to go, time in my calendar you've just created for me. Fantastic.
Right. And again,
Brilliant.
it's easy to say, sometimes hard to do, because we're not always the only ones creating those meetings, right? So it's about cultural change. Another thing we do at Epic is cultural hacking. So what we try and do is get others to understand the cultural impact that they're having about heaping meetings on top of meetings on top of meetings, so that you create accountability for people to go, well, you know what, we don't need a 30-minute meeting. We don't need 20, 30-minute meetings during the course of 2 days to talk about workshops that we're going to have. So it's slowly changing the culture.
Yeah, so I've seen names come on. So why don't we just close that? And what I wouldn't mind doing is, before we forget, because I'm really keen to make sure that we, go through with it, is just get name. Can you just, for 30 seconds, give us a score, 1 out of 10, and you might have a little blurbage, you might not. You just might want to give us the number from a Meeting Mojo perspective, as a joyful observer, of how close did we get to what we were here for and what we said we would do.
No, thank you so much. I think you did a fantastic job. There's so much gold nuggets in the conversation. I have to actually see the recording and start taking some notes as well. There's a lot of things I want to probably do some Google search and YouTube search and explore a little bit. So definitely you have hit the mark. I'm very happy.
I heard that was a 10. Thanks, Naeem. I really appreciate that.
That's what I heard. I'm pretty sure that's what Mark drew as well.
Absolutely, 10 out of 10. I'm just wondering whether Mark has something to show us as well from his illustration point of view.
He's probably under the table crying by now.
Yeah. Just having a mental breakdown right now. I was just going to suggest, because I know there was 3 other topics that were on the agenda that you wanted to talk about. So I've left space to actually complete the drawing post this call, because we ran out of time, so that at least you've got a complete record to take away with you. Would that be helpful, Naeem?
Absolutely. And what we'll do is we will send a post-event survey to the attendees, and we'll include your illustration with that email. So,
yeah, I'm also conscious we've mentioned a couple of people, and we've mentioned some links and things, reference a few books and things like that. So I'll definitely make sure that that's part of what we send out, Naeem, so you can send that out more broadly as well. And I want to take this opportunity to just say thanks everyone as well. Like, really appreciate this. Yeah. And if you've got further questions, like, I sincerely mean it, just reach out to us. More than happy to have a further conversation. Or if you just, hey, can you give us a few more tips or tricks? Here's my environment. How can I make this work? More than happy to carve out, as I said, a virtual coffee. We can have a chat and give you some tips or anything like that as well.
It's a good idea, mate. Some virtual coffees. Because if you hadn't worked it out by now, Jarad and I we enjoy talking about this stuff.
Because we sit around twiddling our thumbs, we got nothing to do, and so no, but sincerely, I'm willing to do that type of stuff. That's awesome, mate. So yeah, we'll definitely complete that. And just before Naeem cuts me off completely, I do want to leave you just, and it's just really a question for you. So it's, what do you think your role is? And I know Naeem said off the top, he said, facilitation, but each one's going to have a different slant on what they think they do. Am I a pure BA? I'm just requirements, and I'm in an environment where that's what I need to do, or whatever it happens to be. I'm focused on the customer, all of those different things. All I do is the question is that you? Because for me, it's about creating space. So how do you create the environment to create the connection? You create the connection and you get whatever you need to get in whatever environment. And that connection might be difficult to do, but I'd say stay that course, and that will lead you to a good place.
Yep. And like we were saying as well, what we're talking about, you can do this anyway. So I'm sitting in a garage, and hopefully we've created a bit of an engaging session, and you don't need a fancy background. Oh, I'm going to have one now. Oh, here's one for Brad. Yeah, he's one of our directors. But you don't need a fancy location. You create it. You create the energy. You create the fun. You create the difference, right? So own it.
That's right. And again, if you look at where I'm working from, actually, I have quite a few boxes on top of my beds where I position the laptop, so it's on the eye level. And the mouse is also on top of another box so that I can move around. Again, announce the winner of tonight's prize. So Linda Field, her question got the highest number of likes. So Linda will contact you and make sure you get the gift. Linda is also our chair for Adelaide.
What was the question?
The question was, so what do you recommend on how to build trust with the stakeholder in a virtual environment?
Good question. Hope we answered it properly. If not, let us know.
Yeah.
Again, although we are finishing the event now, but the speakers gonna stay for another 10-15 minutes in the chat box. So if you want to ask any question to the speakers or the Jarad and Tubbs, put it into the chat, and they'll stay back and answer to some of your questions. So again, thank you, Brendon. Thank you, Jarad. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Mark. And of course, we have Michael as well from Agile, Epic Agile, who helped us to prepare this content. Also want to thank Sarita, our event manager in Sydney, Rani from event team, Anne-Marie from Adelaide, Suzanne, Gary, our event director, and many more people Celine, our marketing manager in Sydney, and many more people who work behind the scene to organize this event.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. Again, the next event is on 29th of July. We have Sean and Alex from State of Matter. We'll talk about the topic of the session is flip it to drive value ahead of cost. So it's all about how we're gonna make sure that we can focus on the value instead of the cost. And there are quite a few techniques they will cover. And if you look at Babok, value is a big part of what we do as a business analyst. So making sure that we can create value, we can identify the value on engagement is really important to have an engaging session. So we're gonna probably stop the visual part of the presentation now, and chat box will be open. Thank you everyone for attending the session. It's a really good participation and a lot of questions from you, and a lot of things were there in the chat box as well. The video of this session, or the recording of this session, will be uploaded in IIBA chapter YouTube channel in a few days time. So keep an eye on that. I will be watching it again for sure. I want to take note of quite a few things I found interesting, and I'm sure you will too. And let us know what do you think about the event. And again, thank you everyone. Thanks for attending today's session.